Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pointman Underground Utilities Podcast. Today is episode 2. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I am your host. And again, we're going to be talking to Paige Tucker, who's the CEO of ProStar. Thanks for joining us, Paige.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Paige, last episode, we covered your history, your experience, and where you got that entrepreneur spirit and your family history and the dynamics within that. Now, today, what I want to talk about with you is more of how ProStar kind of came to fruition and what you're doing now with the system you're delivering, the SaaS model that you're delivering to the end user. What does that look like as the delivery? And then we'll walk into like how you got to that point.
Well, it's actually pretty simple, Chad. All you do is you download our app onto a standard smart device, which could just be, the phone that you probably have within arm's reach, or it can be a tablet, and you're up and running. And we offer two different offerings. It's a standalone mobile app, works anywhere in the world, or you can have what we call Pointman Pro, which is the cloud version, meaning that you have the mobile app that's seamlessly connected to the cloud, and we provide unlimited data storage. We have a tremendous amount of workflow processes and business practices built in to the cloud solution. It's literally a pretty comprehensive asset management system.
Oh, wow. Okay. What's the accuracy on the Pointman solution?
So it depends on the devices you're using. Again, we're a pure software company. This is just a mobile application.
Okay.
It's dependent on the hardware that you're using. So, for example, if you're using an electromagnetic cable and pipe locating device integrated with a precision receiver that provides centimeter accuracy, then it's accurate to the centimeter.
Okay, got it. So if we're looking at Pointman as a way to help different organizations, what are the benefits to like construction or an engineering firm with your tech?
Well, one of the major issues and concerns anytime you're doing construction that requires groundbreaking activities, meaning digging, there's a high probability that you're going to hit utilities during the construction as a result of not having accurate information on where those utilities and pipelines are located. So what we do is we provide a solution that will identify, capture, record, and display where those utilities are buried down to the centimeter, and you can share that information with any stakeholder in real time.
Now you're saying, and you and I have had different conversations about these underground utilities, and from what I've learned in the industry is these utilities are kind of everywhere. Nobody really knows even where they're at. And my experience as a project manager in sewers, it was always we were getting directional bore right into the sewer pipes, and we were hitting different gas mains when we were digging and excavating to put manholes in, for example, stuff like that. So how big is this problem?
Well, it's a big problem, and it's only getting worse. So it's estimated we have well over 30 million miles of buried utilities and pipelines that are in the ground. And to put things into perspective, we have about 2.5 million miles of paved roads that crisscross our nation. So you can imagine a vast network of what I consider to be the above ground infrastructure, but it pales in comparison when you consider what's below ground. And the majority of what's below ground was put in the ground between 50 to 100 years ago. So a large majority of it now is aging, dilapidated, and in serious need of repair and replacement. And the majority of it is buried either below our roadway systems or along the railway systems. It's a tremendous amount of work, number one, to dig up those roadway systems in order to repair and replace our aging, buried infrastructure. But in addition to that, it's a very, very complex network. I often refer to it as a spaghetti bowl of utilities and pipelines that have been haphazardly placed into the ground over the past 100 years. Like 50 to 100 years ago, we had very little oversight, regulation, or compliance. No one was really worried about where these utilities and pipelines were going into the ground. As a result of that, we really don't have a good understanding with any level of accuracy on where the utilities and pipelines are buried. And it might surprise people that even today, if utilities are mapped, they're mapped on paper systems called as-built. And so there's no geospatial accuracy associated to anything that's on a paper map. So the key to this is we're going to have a really good understanding of where these utilities and pipelines are buried. And, we're in the digital era, so we should have a digital representation of where these utilities and pipelines are buried. And then you need a very high level of accuracy, meaning down to the centimeter.
But Paige, there's systems in place for this. There's 811 systems. There's people that come around my house. They mark the ground with this spray paint and stuff like that. I mean, there's a system in place that's established already. How do we overcome that, or how's that change?
Well, I think anyone that's involved as far as being a construction company or an engineering company or an excavating company, in other words, the stakeholders that actually take on the liability, will tell you that, the A11 system for its time was a good system, but today it's not as effective as it should be. I mean, basically, what you're doing is you're going out and locating where the utilities and pipelines are located, and you're either placing a paint mark or a flag in the ground, which again, there's no geospatial accuracy associated to that. In fact, the accuracy may be somewhere between 1 to 2 meters. In addition to that, I have no way of knowing if you actually located the correct utility. It's often a result of mistakenly locating a fiber optic line instead of a power line. I also don't know how deep it is in the ground. I also don't know what other utilities are surrounding that utility. And as a result of that, the amount of utility strikes that we're having each year is only going up. And I think that trend is going to continue. Number one, we have more utilities going into the ground. So we have more utilities that we have to manage. Obviously, the amount of construction that we're having is only increasing. So there has to be a better way of doing this. And I think everyone in this industry recognizes that. And obviously, we have to look through innovation and technology. Almost all the other industries in the world have gone digital because at the end of the day, it's all about the data, but it's also about confidence level that you have in that data. In some cases, you're making a digging decision where, lives and public and worker safety are at hand. And so you want to make sure that if you're making a decision based on data, that data has to be accurate and you have to be confident that it's accurate.
Now, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned strikes. What are the average strikes per year nowadays for utilities?
Well, there's different numbers out there. The number that I always reference is we have about 500,000 utility strikes every year. You could equate that to every minute of every working day we hit a utility or pipeline during construction. And as you know, you hit a utility or pipeline, some really bad things can happen. It could be something as simple as traffic delays. We've all experienced where our businesses are interrupted because maybe the internet is down. You could also have dangerous petroleum products that are seeping into our water systems, and we've seen the news and heard reports of that happening with our rivers or contaminating our drinking water systems or seeping into the ocean. But if you hit a high pressure gas line, there's a very high probability you're going to have an explosion. And when you do, serious injury can be occurred, by the worker and by the public, as I mentioned. You could also have loss of life, and the loss of life number is only going up every single year.
That's one thing I've observed as a volunteer fireman. We used to go out on these utility hits, these utility strikes you're referring to, and we would watch the construction guys kind of just stand around, and we're in the fire department, so we're evacuating people at this point. We're going to each house, apartments, we're evacuating people because the gas is just leaching everywhere throughout the little community. And they would just stand there sometimes looking around, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is not safe for anybody. You guys got to get out of here. Now, if that's happening throughout the country, as we see on the news and the reports that are coming out there, if we start using technology as a better and faster way to find these utilities before we hit them, what would some of the cost advantages would be to some of these I guess government entities or construction companies that are using that technology? What would that look like for them as a cost benefit to finding it and marking it correctly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on some of these large projects where you're talking about maybe like a $1 to $2 or $3 billion infrastructure project, the construction companies actually have to build right into their proposal that there's going to be a significant amount of cost associated to the fact that they know that they're going to hit utilities and pipeline. Like it's inevitable. And those costs can run, 10, 20, $30 million.
Oh, wow.
So if you had a system that could significantly reduce the amount of utility strikes, then obviously you're talking about tens of millions of dollars in cost savings. In fact, we've worked with one of the largest infrastructure construction companies in North America. And initially when we were working with them to test our system and to see just how effective Pointman is, we were able to reduce utility strikes over a 1-year period on a major project by almost 100%.
That's a huge savings.
It is.
Yeah, time and just money. Then we're talking about reducing cost to projects if they're using the right technology the way we're kind of talking about this, you can really lower costs. And with inflation the way it is these days, a lot of these government agencies, for example, that are building this infrastructure want a cost savings to their projects. And this would be one of the unique technologies that could do that for them, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's all about streamlining operations, improving your workflow processes. And as a result of that, that should show up at the bottom line. And, I think everybody wants to streamline their operations, do a better job, provide a better deliverable, and at the end of the day, save money. And that's what we can provide. And we've proven that we can provide that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I talked to a survey engineer, and he was telling me that they're currently using obviously the paint marking to mark utility, and then there's a leeway, right? There's like 2 feet on either side of that marker or something like that. And I'm not no expert in this. I'm just enough to be dangerous. And I said, well, what happens if they, hit the utility 2 feet outside that marker, and that's the responsibility of the contractor, I guess, at that point. And then I'm trying to figure out who's responsible if it's marked and it says it's there, but they hit it. Whose responsibility is that then if it was marked incorrectly?
Well, that's when the finger pointing starts, and then it goes to court, and then they try and figure out actually whose fault it was. Is it the contractor's fault, the engineering surveying firm? Was it the locating company, or was it the excavator? And
Wow.
it's a mess. But as you mentioned, yeah, the A11 system has worked. It's worked for a few decades now, right? But like anything else through innovation, there's probably a better way of doing it. And at the end of the day, we're in the digital era. We should have a digital representation of where all the utilities and pipelines are buried throughout the United States and literally throughout the world. And the fact of the matter is that the technology is now here to enable that. So the question is, why aren't we doing it? And a lot of it just comes down to a change. It's human nature that, we have well entrenched business practices in place. No one wants to change them. And it takes something really disruptive that provides, a significant return on your investment sometimes to make that change. And, we feel we're leading the way. And it starts with early adopters, big companies, engineering surveying firms. We've got government agencies that have now mandated our software. We work with almost all of the major equipment manufacturers because that's important too. Some people want to know, okay, this looks like this is really good, but what's it going to cost? That becomes the next question. Like, do we have to buy additional equipment? No, we're integrated into the equipment that you're already utilizing. Is it expensive? No, it's actually very inexpensive. Does it take a long time to train? No, maybe a couple hours we can have you up and running. So we've gotten to the point where we can address and overcome all the objectives that have to do with just change. And I think that is maybe the biggest hurdle to overcome. But we know this is coming. I mean, we're in the digital era, digital transformation. I always tell everyone, and I'm confident when I say this, you lead, follow, or fall behind. Like you're going to have to do this at some point in time. It just makes too much sense now. Dollars and common sense.
Yeah, no, it completely does. And, the fact that, we're still using the older traditional methods of finding these utilities or marking these utilities underground. And then I also heard someone tell me that they were using pothole inspections to try and mark to make sure they weren't going to strike the utility. And that's another time consuming effort, right? You got to dig a hole to find the utility before you start excavating. That sounds like even more cost, added to the project.
Number one, yeah, what you're talking about is because, let's just say that you located a major fiber optic line, or it could be a major petroleum pipeline or a gas line. The risk and the cost of hitting that line are just too much to bear. So what you need to do is you bring in a hydrovac truck that will drill a hole either in the dirt or the pavement and suck all the dirt out in an attempt to actually expose if that paint mark was correct.
Wow.
And with our system, when we say that you located that utility or pipeline and it's accurate to, say, 1.5 centimeters, you can be confident that that's exactly where it is. In fact, we're starting to influence guidelines and standards. Even the American Society for Civil Engineers just changed their guidelines and standards last year, and it's influenced by our software. We're starting to make change at various levels. I call it the perfect storm. At some point, it'll all come together. For example, the way that it works today is the utility and cable pipe locating device, the EM locate tool, will locate where a utility or pipeline is located the majority of the time. And it'll provide information to you that you have confidence that you have located the correct utility line. Then you put a paint mark down. What we did utilizing Bluetooth technology is that we integrated precision GPS receiver connected to the mobile device and then connected to the locate device. So when you located where the utility line was or the pipeline, we were actually capturing the GPS information as well, which gave us the GPS location reference of where it's located and then capture that on the mobile device, because the GPS chip in the mobile device is only accurate to about 3 to 5 meters. Okay. Just recently, we've got major manufacturers that developed the utility and pipe locating devices that are now integrating precision GPS right into the device. That's a sign of what's coming, because if you can locate the utility or pipeline down to the centimeter, as soon as you put a paint mark on the ground, then basically you just eliminated the accuracy, because I said now you're back to maybe 1 meter on either side. Okay, the only reason they're doing that is because they see what's coming next, which is we're going to start capturing this information digitally down to the centimeter. And in fact, from radio detection, if not the largest, they're one of the largest equipment manufacturers in the world that developed the utility and pipe locating devices. We just signed a commercial distribution deal with them. I mean, they've selected Pointman to be the software that they want to utilize with their devices to capture this information. So, again, one more step. Now we're working with a major equipment manufacturer. I mean, it's going to become the de facto standard that you're going to digitally record where these utilities and pipelines are located. And the best time to do it would be during construction, which is called digital as-builting. As you're actually installing the utilities and pipelines, digitally capture the information, the precise location down to the centimeter, survey grade is what we call it, of where it's located. And then we refer to it as one and done. I'll never have to go out and locate that line again, because I know exactly where it is, and I can pull it up on my tablet or phone and see actually where it is underground. I mean, this technology is here. It's actually been around for a while. The construction industry, 811, has just been slow to embrace it, but it's coming. That I can guarantee you.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, you're talking about all these strikes, the safety issues that we're putting construction workers in, and we already have labor shortage. The last thing we need is that. And I think, as we start adopting this new technology, we can actually attract more of the younger generation to come into this civil infrastructure world that we have, because it makes sense to them then. It's like, okay, well, why would we use spray paint when we have this device sitting there that can, mark it down to a centimeter, right? So it's just logical for them to
I call it change of guard, okay? Where you're right, there's another generation that's going to be coming in, and they're going to be the vice presidents, and they're going to be the CEOs and the COOs of these companies, and they're going to be one that are the head of product development, and they're going to take a look at where this industry currently is. They're going to think we're in the dark ages, right? We're literally in a world where everything should be readily available on your mobile phone, and there's a certain generation that actually expects that. If it's not available on my phone, you're probably not relevant in this world. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? And it's just a paradigm shift. All this information is capable of being readily available on your phone. We can use AR. You should be able to hold your phone up above the ground and see exactly what's buried below that. You should have it up on heads-up display on your glasses. You should have it up on heads-up display in the equipment of the backhoe. I mean, we have autonomous vehicles driving around. That's all based on data, but we're putting paint marks on the ground to identify where a utility or pipeline is located. And I think one of the catalysts is that, we have a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was just passed, and hundreds of billions of dollars is earmarked to improve our roadways and our bridges, as well as replace and repair water systems, sewage systems, and continue to expand our broadband network, particularly in rural areas, so that small towns have access to high-speed internet. The challenge with that is, if we don't know where all the existing utilities and pipelines are located, we could potentially have hundreds of billions of dollars in damages. So I think that's going to be one of the catalysts that says, hey, we got to find a better way of identifying where these utilities and pipelines are buried. And there's companies out there like ProStar that work in, different areas, because it's not one company that's going to solve this. We're all working towards trying to improve and utilizing technology and innovation. We've been working on it for years. And I think collectively that today that we have the solution that could also then easily be adopted by 811.
You're spot on. My couple questions I had was about virtual reality and how you're going to integrate with that. But this would be the question I had next: is how are you going to integrate with these other geospatial technologies that are out there?
So surprisingly, and almost throughout the world, everyone has developed their platform on what's called open data standards.
Okay.
So almost natively, they all work together. The old model used to be that you would develop your hardware or software and be somewhat proprietary. I use the terminology closed, so that it could only work on certain platforms and, maybe with only a handful of different software solutions. The way it works today, you would literally end up failing because you can't limit what it works on. You utilize open data standards. So almost anything we develop works on any piece of equipment, integrates with, any other piece of equipment. Like we're working, say, for example, with like the CAD systems, Autodesk and Bentley, Esri. They all have open APIs now that they provide, so you can just seamlessly integrate into your systems. I would say 10 years ago that was not the case. We all have to work together. We all have a core competency that we can focus on. The old business model used to be one company would try and do it all. The way it works today is, there's companies, like ProStar that has Pointman. I mean, our focus is just developing a precision mobile app that works on any device. That's all we do. We get up every day. That's all we do. That's all we focus on. As a result of that, we like to think that we're the best in the world at it. If you wanted to try and do what we were doing, then you would have to, hire a whole nother development team, have a whole nother department. The way it works today is these companies we all work together. You just nailed it. It's all about integration, open data standards, open APIs. That's where everything is moving towards.
One quick question popped in my head. Could homeowners use Pointman?
Pardon me?
Could homeowners, like just me as a residential owner, like sign up to get access?
Yeah, they could actually, interestingly enough, we're starting to work with some large actors that build these large subdivisions, 3,500 acres. We're in discussion with one like 15,000 acres to create what you would call, a smart subdivision. Because it makes sense that when you're building the subdivision, go ahead and digitally record where all of the subsurface infrastructure is going, into the ground. So then when it's done, not only do you know where everything is in case something goes wrong and you have to refix it or replace it, but then anytime you do any type of expansion, then you know exactly where everything is. Now, keep in mind that today, to identify where a utility or pipeline is, you have to have other equipment. And usually it's other companies, service providers that have that equipment. So a homeowner could utilize our system to identify where the utilities and pipelines are located, but just keep in mind that you do need additional hardware. I mean, we have schools that are using our system. We have golf courses that use our system. We have zoos as clients. We have ski resorts. I mean, literally, it's, any industry that's impacted by not knowing where utilities and pipelines are located could benefit, from our software solution. And by the way, you can just go to Google Play or the Apple Store and just download our software. You can actually download it for free. If you want to get into where we provide centimeter accuracy, then there's a fee for that.
Okay. Very good to know. This is very helpful. And I think we have a little delay going on, but we got a couple more minutes. What's the global application look like for Pointman? What does the future look like for ProStar going forward?
Well, we developed our system so that it's scalable. What I mean by that is today it works anywhere in the world, any language. We're in discussions with companies that are in Saudi Arabia. We have clients that are in Australia. I know we got a call the other day from a dealer that wanted to become a distributor in New Zealand. As I mentioned, we're working with companies like Radio Detection who have, global presence. I'm in discussions and working with, Leica. They're actually owned by the largest mapping company in the world, which is Hexagon. So, yeah, this works anywhere in the world. And the issue we address, not knowing where utilities and pipelines are buried, is not an issue that's isolated to the United States or North America. In fact, I would say in other regions of the world, it's even a bigger problem because obviously the population is much larger, which means there's a lot more construction, but also their infrastructure that's below ground in some cases is, much older than what we have here in the United States. So, they're even facing greater issues. So, yeah, this is a global problem.
Yeah, this is a great technology to overcome that big problem, is what it sounds like to me, how we're going to be able to move forward with the Pointman system. And really, I want to get into more eventually how you develop the tech. And I think we'll have another episode for that in the future. But in this episode, it's been great to kind of understand a little bit more about the Pointman and ProStar system and how it works. So I appreciate your time explaining that to us there, Paige.
Yeah, and I'm happy to explain it, and I appreciate the opportunity that you're giving me to share this information. So thank you.
I appreciate you, and thank you so much for sharing your information with the audience, and truly appreciate your time. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paige.